My name is Richard Morellis, and I want to welcome you to the Prison Post. This is your podcast for conversations surrounding the need to reform prisons from the perspective of formerly incarcerated people, community members, and leaders in the restorative justice movement. The Prison Post will feature an episode every Wednesday with people who are in the fight to restore lives and heal communities. And we're back. Welcome back to the Prison Post. Today we have a friend of ours as a guest, Adnan Khan. He's the executive director and co-founder of Restore Justice. Welcome to the show, bro.
Thank you, Richard. And Jay, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, for sure. I also want to welcome back my co-host and brother, Jay, Jason Bryant.
Yes, sir. It's good to be back.
Yep. He was away for a minute. I know you didn't know, but he had him and his wife gave birth to a child. His wife gave birth to a child.
Yeah, she gave birth. I was just there holding her hand when she did it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
14 days ago.
Yeah.
How many?
2 weeks. He's 2 weeks old, almost 2 weeks old. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
yeah.
It's such a trip to have a child in general. Maybe I don't want to jump ahead, and I just want to say, like, especially for someone like with a life sentence, when legally the opportunity to have a child was taken away.
sure.
Even when they restored the family visits a little bit later, I just didn't want to raise a child in prison. But just fast forward real quick, having a child, man, in a pandemic, right? 2020, my son was born on April 27th, and then 2 weeks later, the uprising happens. Right. So when my wife and I talk about not just his history, how he's a miracle, essentially, but then when he studies his life and the time when he was born, like 20, 30, 40 years from now, it's such a historic time he's living in and we're living in. So just an interesting time to have a child, man.
Absolutely. And I also have a 19-month-old, so I'll show you a picture.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's right.
Yeah, full of love and exuberance and very little sleep.
So coming out after 20 years to a 19-month-old and a 2-week-old, what's that like?
Wow, it's amazing. It's like a dream in so many ways. Speaking to what Adnan had brought up, we, as lifers, we had gotten our family visits back in 2017. I had already been married for 4 years at the time. So this was an unexpected blessing. And, my wife and I were confident that freedom was coming. So we took the chance of getting pregnant in prison, and God blessed us. And, we have 2 beautiful boys as a result. It's just so incredibly humbling and amazing to be home with them and to be a part of their lives. So grateful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I know you said you have a 5-month, 6-month-old?
No, have a 4-month-old.
4-month-old.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I know, Jay, you're talking about sleep. I mean, being being woken up by correctional officers for 16 years for me, this is a cakewalk for me in terms of waking up, but I will say that I'm actually very fingers crossed, blessed so far for him to have a very strict sleep schedule. And he, since his birth, he's been amazing at it, man. So I'm very fortunate. Yeah. That's for now.
That's good. Yes, sir. It gets a little bit more challenging when they hit the 2-year mark. That's what I'm dealing with my oldest son right now. His favorite word is no. Like, you want to go to bed? No.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
All right. I'd like to give you a little bit of a formal introduction, especially for our audio audience on the Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher Radio. I would like to share a little bit about you and then hear a little bit about your story. Adnan is the executive director and co-founder of Restore Justice, which he co-founded while incarcerated. He was sentenced to 25 years to life under the felony murder rule at the age of 18. While in prison, he inspired, launched, and worked on the felony murder rule legislation, also known as SB 1437, with his organization, which he co-founded, Restore Justice. The bill passed, and after serving 16 years in January of 2019, Adnan was the first person resentenced under this bill that he helped create. During his incarceration, he created also First Watch, a media filmmaking project produced entirely by incarcerated men at San Quentin State Prison that still produces short films to this day. His sentence was also commuted by Governor Jerry Brown in December of 2018 before he left office. He is an Art for Justice Fellow, and today he continues his advocacy both nationally and internationally as well. Again, thank you for joining us today, Adnan. I saw you and your wife at the Capitol last year, and it was a blessing to see you. I had heard about your story while I was incarcerated, and thank you for all the work that you've done on SB 1437. We've been on a couple of phone calls, and just looking at some of your Facebook lives, I realized, I said, man, me and this guy have 81 friends in common. So it's good to have you here and for a good hour to hear more about your story, your organization, the work that you do today. So yeah, man, it's great to have you.
Thank you, man. And 81 friends in common, man. I'm surprised we didn't link up sooner. You know,
what's going on with that?
But I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad we're here now. And I look forward to whenever this pandemic's over and when it's safe to really connect in person. I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you. What I want to mention was about the Capitol and the advocacy. I mean, how for me it's very powerful, just the visual of having people who are formerly incarcerated, once serving life or not, but just particularly for serving life, at least in my case, to see everyone at the Capitol, like deep, you know, and representing and participating in democracy and wanting change. One thing I want to mention, I think a lot of people get confused about, for me at least, wanting change and wanting to change the system as not being accountable. And it's a very fine line, but understanding like causative factors, understanding like my childhood and the systemic failures that were there that led me up to making that decision that night to commit my crime. I understand that public safety isn't just a personal accountability, which is personal accountability is the main thing for me.
Sure.
But changing the system so where another child or a kid doesn't go through what I went through and hurt someone else or harm someone's family. And so to see all of us understand that, and we're at the state capitol with legislators and sharing our stories and our solutions, it's just been very, very motivating and powerful for me to be a part of with you all.
Yeah, that's great, Adnan. What I'm hearing you say is that it's not either or. It's not like you need to either focus on personal responsibility or the need for systemic change. It's both and. It takes both to really affect positive change in the world. That's great.
And we know that many people, I mean, you were in 16 years, we were both in over 20, and we know that many go there and they get locked into some unproductive type of life. Some people just play chess and dominoes and work out and have a job as a porter and have a little ambition on transforming their life. But you took another route. You took another route. Helped create your own organization in there. Obviously, First Watch
helped to pass legislation. I was talking to Richard earlier about it, and it's I did over 20 years myself, and I was pretty productive with my time, but I never thought to actually try and pass legislation that could, affect real change. It's remarkable.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'm just curious. Would you share a little bit about your journey of going from prison to where you are today?
Yeah, and just so I could recap, like, where would you want me to start? From prison on or before?
That would be great. Like, I think just to kind of piggyback off of what Rich was sharing, like most people, I think there's a general culture in prison and kind of an attitude that like once you're there, it's like, well, I got to do my time, and I'm going to do my time in a way that's, comfortable, whether it's playing cards, whether it's, working out, but it's typically not super productive. But you, with your time in prison, you did some really remarkable things. And I think what we're asking Adnan is like, what was your motivation?
Yeah.
Like, how did you make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple angles to that answer, for me answering that. And one of them is that I don't think that I took a different route. I think that at the end of closer to the end of my incarceration, some stars aligned, and I was very blessed to have resources and community advocates for me to do what I did. It's not like, let me just think of, I want to change a law. I personally didn't change the law. It takes legislation, it takes votes, it takes people talking to legislators. It takes someone writing the law. Just writing the law doesn't mean that it's going to get passed. Thousands and thousands of laws are written each year.
Right.
So there's a lot more that went into it. You have to convince or educate the Public Safety Committee, and hopefully it gets past that in the Senate, and then hopefully it gets past the Appropriations Committee and convince them why fiscally this is the right thing to do. Then the floor vote, and then it goes to the other side in the Assembly. I mean, it's just a a process that is a very lengthy and meticulous strategic process. Also for me, like the stars aligned, I will say that as well. But rewind for a second. I didn't have like a clean path. I did what we call removals when I was in a level 4 yard, acts of violence on people to promote politics in prison and earn stripes, I guess you could say. I've been caught with cell phones. I was selling phones and tobacco and introducing into the facility. I have all that, like I was written up for all of that. But when I look at why I was doing that, outside looking in, it's, oh my gosh, you're not doing the right thing and you're a criminal still and you're still doing criminal activities. Well, for me, I just want to say that the moment I was sentenced to 25 to life and sent to a state level 4 facility, maximum security facility, the moment I stepped in my cell, I was in there with the COs put me in the room, shut the door behind me. I still have my linen over my shoulder. And there's this big 6'3" Samoan gang member, Crip from LA, is like, hey, homie, we're on lockdown, right? And I was like, what's going on? And he says, well, there's basically no movement, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're going to be basically stuck in the cell because a man was killed in the chapel. So think about, like, for me as a young man, young lifer at that, linen over my shoulder, still standing right in front of the door inside the cell. And you told me out of supposedly the safest places in the prison, which is a chapel, that someone was killed in there.
Right.
And so rehabilitation, quote unquote, changing my life, even though I would read, reflect, study. I spent my first 4 years in county jail. So it's not like I was just county jail and then immediately prison. I did have 4 years in a 23-hour lockdown for 4 years, reading, writing, studying, whatever, right, on my own. But when I got to, okay, here's a life sentence. I'm here in a prison facility, and this is what this person is telling me. My immediate response was survival. And what survival meant in the outside world or in different facilities was very different for what it meant for me in that moment, which was, how do I survive? Where do I fit in? What does fitting in look like? What does safety within that community, that prison community that I'm part of, look like? Not to be bullied. Okay, I have to put in work, which means I have to do acts of violence. And then people will, give me stripes. So my point is that I had multiple paths, which is actually like segments of one total journey.
Right. And what year did you first go to prison, Adnan?
So I was arrested 2003, and then it was beginning of 2003. I went to prison in 2007.
So in 2007, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunities for programming. I don't think that transition had occurred yet. It wasn't until like 2011, 2012 when there started being some new opportunities to participate in positive programming. Is that true? Was that true for your experience as well?
Oh yeah, that was absolutely true from my experience. It was very, very limited or no programming. I'm thinking it was only religion that was the program. Yeah. So you go to church, mosque, synagogue, or even, at least on general population yards, even going to Jewish services was dangerous for people, right? Like because of prison politics. But that's the only, I guess, path that I had at that moment. So it's weird because it's almost like you had to pick a side. Either, hey, you're going to services, are you with us or are you against us? Right. And so you have to make those meticulous decisions as well. And going to church or the mosque or whatever, finding spiritual comfort, I guess you could say, for me, it was still challenged personally and culturally. Like, whose side are you on? Because it's so dangerous at that. Then you have the cultural perspective, right? Correctional culture, and which is the administrative culture, And I think the difficult part is trying to navigate all of that at the same time. I wanted program, I wanted education, I wanted a safe environment to practice that, but it wasn't provided. And I also needed to survive.
Sure,
right. And I think about I went in 1998 and show up in 1999 at Calipatria level 4, a murderous place, an evil place. And I've experienced the same thing. I need to survive. And back then I don't remember any programs. And I remember if you went to church, the saying was amongst the prison culture. I was from Southern California. So the Southerners was, if you're going to do it 100%. And if you don't, well, there's going to be consequences, whether it mean 2-on-1, beating, stabbing, removal. And so, I didn't have enough fear and courage to take a stand for that. I wanted to walk down a path of faith, but I didn't have the courage at the time. But it did come later for me. So I gave myself over to the prison politics and and did what I needed to do and to fit in and to look the part, to play the part, knowing deep down in my mind, this wasn't the life that I wanted. And eventually with my cellmate, we began using heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines. We were injecting it. And one night I was nearly on my deathbed from an overdose on heroin. And in that night, I called out to God. I said, God, help me. I don't want to die as a drug addict in prison. I failed my family. I failed society. I failed myself. And here I am doing the same thing that got myself here, 25 to life sentence. And here I am doing the same thing. Help me, change me. And I won't do this anymore. And the next day I told my cellie, and it's been since then, since the end of 1999, since I've ever used drugs again. And that was my aha moment. And I had to begin to take a stand against a lot of times I was terrified, only by the grace of God that I believe that I made it out many times. He watched over me, going to the shot cars and tell them, hey, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm serving God. And so what I want to ask was, in that case, what was your aha moment? Was it a gradual process for someone? For some people, it's that one Apostle Paul type moment, or others, it's a gradual process. What was it like for you?
For me, it was definitely a combination of both. It was I guess you could say, aha moment. Like my incarceration, my immediate arrest was an aha moment for me. But then the rest of it was gradual and developed, I could say. And no matter what, so, one thing about when we talk about survival, for me, there's layers. And I think for a lot of us, there's layers to what survival means. There's emotional survival, physical survival, mental survival, and spiritual survival. And survival means fighting for life for me. It's like I have to fight. There's a active battle that's going on, and multiple battles that's consumed in one, which is me, the person, Adnan. So for me to survive, I had the aha moment in terms of this is not what I want. I don't want this for my life. I don't want this for my legacy. I don't want this for my family because I'm putting pain in my family. I don't want this for the victim and the victim's family and the community that I've harmed. That wasn't. Maybe I couldn't articulate it like that the way I'm telling you now. And as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, while fighting life sentence and not trying to get at that time the death penalty, it's so much to balance. It's very difficult. And the culture, our justice system, quote unquote, is not there to support accountability. It's not there to support fostering the emotional survival, the mental survival.
Right.
So one, we talked about physical survival from violence, right? I walk into the cell, a guy was killed in the chapel. Now I see race riots in front of my eyes. I'm seeing people get stabbed very consistently. That's physical survival. I'm seeing police brutality. I'm seeing a lot of that. Seeing and experiencing, excuse me. But then from that comes, how do I survive emotionally? And mind you, I'm coming with luggage into my incarceration as a child. One thing I like to, as a bullet point in my life, by the time I was 17, man, I was homeless. I was a parentless, homeless high school dropout. And at 18, I committed my crime with all those factors. So all that luggage, the emotional luggage, the mental luggage, even my physical conditions prior to my incarceration were sleeping in cars, parks, friends' houses, couches. And I'm bringing that into a prison system, right? And so survival, again, going back to that point is I had an aha moment. I actually had an aha moment when I was homeless, but that didn't mean that I had the means and the resources to change that or to support that aha moment. Surviving emotionally was hard, very hard. Richard, I hear you saying the drugs. I mean, that's to me was an emotional survival. Mental survival. I need to read. I need to study. I'm a high school dropout. I need to educate myself, but there's no school.
Right.
What classes can I take? How do I educate my how do I become intelligent? And I'm talking about information and knowledge. Right. And then there's spiritual survival. Like I'm dying here spiritually. I need motivation. I need inspiration, a higher power. There's a stigma that says, oh, all of a sudden you go to prison and now you believe in God, right? The outside looking in again, right? All of a sudden you believe in God because you're locked up. Where were you? Where was God before in your heart, right? What people don't realize, and again, for me, it was, okay, I have a life sentence, but where do I find redemption? Who do I seek redemption from? Where do I stay spiritually alive?
Exactly.
Right? Where am I loved still? Where am I loved? And religion and God, a creator, a higher power, provides that. And so, as I'm dying spiritually as well as I'm surviving spiritually, I'm trying to find ways to support my spirituality, my life in spirituality. And then there's the mind, body, soul, all of those things in one as Adnan in a prison with a life sentence. It's complicated, man.
Right. So at what point do you come to start working on like SB 1437, Restore Justice, First Watch? When did that time come for you?
It came to me when I was in San Quentin, when I realized there were resources available for me and people like Alex, my co-founder, and Sarah, a co-founder, and Alex, now my wife, where I felt, first of all, it was a series of motivations, like Senate Bill SB 9, and then Senate Bill 260, 261. For those who are listening, those are pieces of legislation that passed that gave people who were serving life sentences as teenagers, and then they upped the age to give them relief a little bit earlier to go to parole board. But when I saw that happening, and when I saw the culture outside of prison, like, wow, there's actual movement happening and changing laws, because people like us came in when no one cared, right? Like they said
if you have a life sentence, the only way you're going home is in a pine box.
I mean, the governor said that. That's a quote from the governor at that time, right? So I went in with George Bush president. I went in with Arnold Schwarzenegger governor. Right, and that's coming right off of Pete Wilson, Gray Davis.
Yeah.
So there's just the culture in prison. Like I remember when I was going through trial, they said don't take any deal with a life sentence. You rather lose trial so you have an ability to appeal it. Because because then you're just stuck. You're gonna, like you said, like leaving a pine box.
Right.
But Richard, to your question is, I always knew for me, an appeal actually would not get me out. And the reason I say that, if I could just rewind to what got me into prison. So one night I'm with a group of friends, and one of my friends says, hey, we know a person, he has $1,000 worth of weed, and in a fake drug deal, we'll act like, well, since we know him and you don't, we'll set it up as if you're buying it from him. And once he hands it to you, run into a car, literally sprint into a car, and we'll call up a driver and he'll drive off and we'll split the goods later. And so immediately and impulsively, I agreed to it. So when this young man came down, again, I was 18, this young man was 19, and he handed me the few bags of weed. My co-defendant, who I didn't know at that time, he was the person that was called from my friends to be a getaway driver. He pulled this young man out of the car, and it appeared to me as if they were fighting. It was 8:00 p.m. It was dark outside. I even remember I got out of the car. I yelled at him, like, what are you doing? Get back in the car. What are you doing? Like, we have this stuff. Why are you fighting? I'm just yelling this outside of the car. He gets back into the car. We flee the scene. The next morning at 2 a.m., I was arrested. I was taken to the interrogation room, and that's when I was told that I'm being charged with robbery and murder. And I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that. Like, wait, what just happened? What did you just say? Like, someone died? That young man lost their life? How? When? Like, I just couldn't believe it. I remember crying hysterically. That moment in itself was traumatizing. I couldn't believe that someone's life had been lost. My participation in it. And so then I learned that there was this, that my co-defendant, who was 21 years of age, bipolar schizophrenic, had severe mental health conditions, was not taking his medication, and apparently concealed a knife on him, because one of the agreements were like no guns, knives, or weapons were to be used. It was like a snatch and grab and run. And so that's why it didn't make sense. Like, where was a weapon? And it just didn't make sense to me. So when I found out that my co-defendant was, like I said, 21, bipolar, schizophrenic, had a concealed knife apparently, and he took the life of that young man, then I learned about the felony murder rule. And the felony murder rule said, in my case, if you're involved in a felony, which my case was a robbery, that I'm equally guilty of the murder, which I'm equally guilty and responsible for the sentence of 25 to life, the mandatory least 25 to life. So when I went through trial, for example, I was not on trial for a murder. So my trial literally started with the district attorney saying that, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're not here to prove that Mr. Khan committed a murder. I'll tell you right now, he did not commit a murder. Your only job is to find out if he was guilty of an intent to commit a robbery, which I was absolutely guilty of. I'm still guilty of today. And so when the jury found me guilty of an intent to commit a robbery, they went home to their families. The next phase was the judge's phase, which carried a mandatory 25 to life sentence, which I was sentenced to. So going back again to your question, Richard, I want to build that or share that for context. I always knew that the court did not make an error, which is how you can appeal. Right. An appeal is, you know what, the court made an error. There was some type of fault done in my process, but it really technically wasn't in mine because they did everything right according to that law. I was and am guilty of a intent to commit a robbery. So I always knew that the law would have to change for me to go home sooner than a 25 to life parole board appearance.
Adnan, would you share with us a little bit about 1437, SB 1437, and what it means, who's eligible, and how they're
that's so complicated, man. So Senate Bill 1437 the short version is that if there is a clear if you are, quote, first of all, the non-killer in a crime, right, if you are a non-killer in a crime, but particularly under the felony murder rule, which says that a group of people, 2 or more people, went to go commit a felony. That felony can be a burglary, robbery, carjacking. Those are felonies. And without actually going to hurt someone and someone ended up dying, not in your hands, that's how you can grant relief if you were not the killer in a crime and your felony says that you went there to commit that felony. Now, I know these are like legal jargon and it's kind of confusing, but sadly, a lot of people don't fall under the felony murder rule because in my case, there was a clear distinction also of me not being the killer in the crime. And there was a clear distinction and evidence saying that we did not go, or I did not go
with
intent to kill, but intent to commit that robbery. There's another thing that we're struggling is that DAs, different type of district attorneys, and even judges are challenging the constitutionality of the bill that was passed, which is Senate Bill 1437. So they're saying Senate Bill 1437 was done illegally, it's unconstitutional, therefore we are not acknowledging it and we're going to fight it. So they're still illegally. They're saying that from their perspective, instead of boring you with like legal stuff, there were propositions that were passed, Prop 15 and Prop 7, 40 some years ago, that particularly deal with the LWOP or special circumstances case, which is reckless indifference to human life. Again, these are like legal jargon, but they're using laws that were passed in the past to say that you had to do this through the vote of entire California in a ballot versus going through the legislator, which is we went through the 40 senators, 80 assembly members within the state legislature.
What are your thoughts?
They're saying,
so basically what they're saying is the legislature undermined the voters' intent.
That's what they're saying, but there's no legal backing to that. They're trying to find something to make it make sense, but it doesn't. But it's a delay process. Now, another thing is, it's clear that they know that it is legal. They're just trying to fight it and trying to find a loophole in it. But California has 58 counties. Here's another thing that worked in my favor. Why I'm out here today is because 58 counties are not all saying that it's constitutional. There are some counties that are saying, you know what, it is constitutional. We're going to look at people's case. If they fit the law, then they deserve relief under the law if their case fits the law. So for me, again, my county and the head district attorneys in my county, they believe that the law is constitutional. And when the judge looked at my case, the judge found me for this to be true. By the way, it was the same judge that sentenced me to 25 to life, resentenced me about 16 years later to 3 years for the robbery. So
I think this is an important conversation, and I want to reiterate the Prison Post podcast, the podcast that is for like the family members, the loved ones of the incarcerated, or those who are involved in restorative justice movement, criminal justice reform, prison reform, that care. And hearing your story about 1437, I'm sure there's a lot of guys that are still incarcerated who could qualify or would qualify or are in the courts. And they're being shot down. Some have been released, and they're probably wondering, like, why is this guy getting released out of San Francisco and this other guy's not getting released out of Orange County? So, what is the latest with in the court system? Because I remember hearing something from the Attorney General of California said it is constitutional.
Right, but it's nothing. There's nothing legally binding that has written. It's like legally saying from this day forth, it is legal. Right now people can assess and say in certain it's flimsy based on different counties and different jurisdictions, but there isn't like one overall ruling by like a California Supreme Court that says, hey, it's legal. DAs, you need to act on it.
But isn't it
right?
true
And
that isn't it true that the appellate court, a higher court, has ruled it to be constitutional? I think it was. Right.
Now there's not the higher court that you need the approval from. And I don't want to put any misinformation out there, because if that was the case, then people would start really getting relief around it.
Right,
Another thing that we're seeing is that DAs have found it, may or may not found it constitutional, but now they're offering these manslaughter deals, which is nonsense, right? Like, because a manslaughter deal is not like what the law is saying. The law is saying you should only be charged for the felony. In my case, the robbery. That's why I was resentenced to 3 years for a robbery. And what the law says that I am not legally responsible for the murder. So to give somebody a deal, it's just another way to give someone a conviction on their record. And so the district attorney's office can seem like that they got a higher conviction rate. That's all it's about.
We have a colleague and he qualified and was taken back to courts on 1437. The district attorney comes to the public defender and says, well, we don't want to grant 1437, but we'll tell you what, we'll let him out this week so long as he signs for 1170D. And Jason can talk more about receiving 1170D, what that is from the Secretary of CDCR, Ralph Diaz, former secretary. But so it's either, look, you've been in 23 years, you want to continue to fight this in the courts, or you can get out today and you got to sign to manslaughter.
Sure. It does seem like the DAs will use it as a strategy to maintain their conviction rate and get people out of prison, because they know they're going to lose in the long run, because the law is actually constitutional. Yeah.
And I was watching I don't know if it's a documentary or the brief video on your website about the Wall Street Journal or New York Times?
New York Times.
The New York Times did. Sorry about that. The New York Times did it. And you were saying that this is the last country, in the world that has a felony murder rule. And why do you think that they're so hell bent on keeping this law? It seems obvious. I mean, if you didn't murder and if you didn't have the intent, why should you get charged with murder?
We have a very punitive society. One of the books that was really powerful for me reading was by Michel Foucault. He's this French philosopher, talks a lot about government and prisons. And the name of the book is called Punitive Society. He has another great one, by the way. It's called Discipline and Punish. Just throwing out a recommendation. But in Punitive Society, he talks about that there is this idea and system of control, and there is the government that's up top, and it filters its control through its government agencies, prison, policing, hospitals, and other, schools even. And so when we look at the culture of the society that we live in, it's not one of honoring redemption, second chances, help, support, right? So even when you look at the defund the police concept, if our police or prison system truly understood that reallocating money to children and community that need it, like, they would defund themselves, right? But it's a system of power and control and punishment that is linked to controlling the citizens or the people of this country. Because other than that, like, redemption would be the first and foremost thing. Accountability would be the first and foremost thing. And this idea of collectivism, which is a shared accountability. Now, we talked about this in the opening of this show, is like I definitely hold myself responsible and accountable. But there's also like the idea of collectivism is how do we hold everyone responsible when somebody fails in our society?
Right.
A lot of European and Norwegian and Dutch concepts are, when somebody commits a crime in those countries, they don't just say, hey, you better, something's wrong with you, we're going to hurt you and punish you to prove to you that something's wrong with you. What they do say is that, wow, someone committed a crime. Like, how did we as a society fail them?
Right. So how do we contribute to that?
How do we contribute to that? And how do we as a collective help that individual and society at large? But America, sadly, is not there yet. And as you know, there is racism. There is a system of systemic oppression that plays into this culture. So even when you have all the way down to 1437, the Senate bill is like, no, we're going to give you a deal, or we don't think it's constitutional. You are a murderer. You should have known better. Why were you out there that night? I've heard legislators literally tell me that, like, why were you out there that night? And it's like, I'm not excusing why I was out there that night. I'm telling you that where were the social service? The police came when I committed a crime. I told you when I committed my crime, I was parentless, homeless, high school dropout. School system failed me. Where was shelter for me when I was homeless? I'm talking about support services as 17, 18-year-old. And you know, where was like the things that I needed from society and the services to help me just help myself weren't available.
Sure.
You know, so I think that is why, Richard, in like a very long-winded way of saying that we do live in a punitive society, man, and that is what needs to be changed versus also a supremacist society.
So I have a little bit of a tough question for you, Adnan. Do you think that 1437 in any way could be misused by people who are actually guilty of murder? Could it possibly be?
Yeah, man. I mean, you know, it comes down to legality. It comes down to like the law. I mean, if in your case there's nowhere where it says you've committed murder, you should be granted relief. I mean, we have multiple loopholes. We see different races or different people getting relief under. So murder is not one thing, right? Like people get relief under self-defense or involuntary manslaughter. This is very common and a tool used sometimes for people who are white. Seriously. But can it be used wrong? I mean, I don't know. I can't speak on that person's. I can't speak on that. I just don't know. I just know that it's a law that shouldn't be around. If every other country that has found it unconstitutional and got rid of it that once had it, except for America, that says a lot there.
Right. No, I agree.
Jay, would you be willing to share? Jay actually was in the courts for 1437.
Sure, still am.
Yeah.
So in 1999, I was charged with first-degree felony murder. I was not the shooter, and for years I had this deep belief that I didn't. The life sentence that I received, it wasn't warranted. So when 1437 came out, I applied like a lot of people did for relief, and it took my sentencing court, I think, 9 months to come to the decision that I did not qualify, based on the fact that the sentencing judge felt it was not constitutional. And moreover, even if it was constitutional, he felt that I was a major participant in the crime. There was obviously plenty of evidence that I did not commit the murder, nor that we had the intent to go in to kill. But he felt that because I initially displayed some reluctance to go through with the crime, the robbery, the fact that I relented and I actually went through with it showed that I was a major participant who acted with reckless indifference to human life. So that was my experience.
What was your sentence? Was it an LWOP sentence?
No, it was 26 years to life.
26 years to life.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it was that judge, correct? You said that deemed it unconstitutional and denied your motion?
Yes.
Your petition?
Yes. I'm in the Court of Appeals right now. So. Moreover, as Richard spoke on earlier, I was awarded 1170D by former Secretary Diaz for my behavior in prison, which the same sentencing judge who denied me on the 1437 also denied my 1170D petition from the Secretary of CDCR. So that I just share that to kind of speak to the point that what you had said earlier about like county to county, there's no real uniformity. Like one county may be very understanding of the value of rehabilitation, restoration, laws change, and certain people need to be looked at. And another county is very, like you said, very punitive. Committed a crime, you caused damage, therefore you must suffer.
Yeah, so, I'd like to say something on that. Like I've been friends with Jay for over a decade. Here's a guy who only had one write-up in all of his 20 years, and it was nonviolent. Here's a guy who's earned 2 master's degrees while he was incarcerated, one in philosophy, one in psychology, one of the best men that I've ever known in my life. Totally transformed his life, gave back to many, many groups, whether it be the students coming in from the outside, from high school, college, at-risk youth. I mean, he's given himself back. And I know from being a friend that he went there with Jay's hardcore on taking personal responsibility for his actions. And we firmly believe that, the Prison Post podcast is sponsored by the Crop Organization. And we believe in personal accountability and also systemic responsibility. So he's hyper responsible, but at the same time, I know that he did not go there with the intent to murder, but to rob. And he would take full responsibility of that in a heartbeat. And that said, to be out here advocating for him and knowing that this judge just seemed to me, my opinion is just arbitrarily like, nah, 1170D from the Secretary of CDCR recommended that he be released now. I'm good with that. I'm not even going to hear it. 1437. If you look at all the details and the changed life, including the Secretary of CDCR saying he should be released, and he both got shot down. Now, if he was in San Francisco, I don't think that would have happened. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
No, I mean, first of all, man, it's so sad to hear that it comes down to one person, one judge. And if you look at both of our cases and just compare them, right? Like my judge adhered to the law,
right?
For whatever her reasons were. And their role is like they take an oath to interpret and administer the law.
Sure.
Now, when it comes to all of a sudden, in my situation, my judge did, and your situation, they didn't. We're in the same state, right? And our it seems like from what I'm listening to you say, like our case factor, the intent part, which the law is heavily is weighted on, is the intent to commit the felony. It's just very frustrating, Richard, and like to hear to hear that in the same state, two different judges had two different decisions on the very same or similar thing. And that's the problem when you talk about systemic responsibility. That's the problem. Sure. Like you got a recommendation from the head of corrections, and that's still not enough. Like there's way more. That says a lot about the judge and the system. Says a lot to me.
And thank God that Governor Newsom granted him a commutation, and now he's home with his family. And now we're out here and building our organization to give back, to be of service. And let's talk about your organization, Restore Justice. What do you guys do? I mean, I've looked at your website, the advocacy work, the programs in prison. Would you talk about Restore Justice?
So Restore Justice, we had, before Restore Justice became quote unquote Restore Justice, our team was doing the work. So myself, Phil Melendez, who's a former lifer, Aziz, who's a former lifer, are on staff now with Alex, Rebecca, Sarah. The three people, women who are coming into San Quentin. And one thing that we were doing, our work has always been around, yes, this 1437 was kind of like, I don't want to say a side project, that was like a big part. But before 1437, before that, our work was always around violence and extreme sentences. And we believe that we believe like our slogan is from proximity to policy, and particularly towards life sentences, extreme sentences, and how we as a society respond to harm/violence. And the work that we were doing was with survivors, people who have lost loved ones to homicide, and people who have committed or part of those acts, like myself and you both here. And so what we were doing were in San Quentin, bringing people into this facility, having these dialogues about how can we systemically make a safer society, and sharing each other's perspectives of the survivor. Now, this is surrogate. This isn't the actual party that was harmed talking to the actual person who's done the harm. This is like a surrogate, right?
Right.
And what we realized was like, okay, here we are having these little events in the prison where administration has cleared people who are survivors and victims of crime to come into the facility, have these dialogues with people incarcerated who are serving life, and really start and open the door of healing. But what we started learning was when we would speak and share, and when survivors would speak and share, is that they were harmed also by a system. They like survivors were sharing, like, the district attorney, I felt used by them to get a conviction. I was told that I'm going to get justice, but justice only meant a conviction, not healing. And there was a difference between healing and conviction. And like when that really opened our eyes to like, there's way more. I mean, we already knew it, but to hear the anecdotal responses to systemically, it was very powerful. So then we started including district attorneys and trying to convince and have district attorneys come into this facility. Legislators, it was crazy to hear how legislators only listen and politically use one victim perspective. And anytime there's a victim perspective of lock them up, throw away the key, they would use that for their political gain. But when you hear survivors and victims of like, no, we want restorative practices. We want people to get healing inside. I don't want this person who committed a crime against my loved one to do this to someone else. But then once they understand who that person was, they realize like, wow, the system failed them as well. And my loved one will probably be still alive today if there were more resources in the community. So we started including legislators in these intimate dialogues. And then that's when proximity to policy came to be. And so that's when we realized we were doing this work. It's like, okay, we need to package it. We were doing it like very loosely, and we didn't have funding for it. And so that's when Restored Justice, the 501c3, the nonprofit, came to be, while simultaneously working on Senate Bill 1437.
What were some of the results of bringing in these prosecutors and people who are, on the other side of the aisle of criminal justice? What were some of the results you saw?
I think the immediate result was like a wow, or like our at least our mind has been open to seeing something, a different perspective. And one of the challenges were like, okay, is this a narrow perspective, or is this how most people think? And so it requires a little bit more. It's not a one-time event that's going to change someone's life, though we've had events really, really alter people's thinking. It has happened. But the immediate results were like, okay, we do need to look at the system a little differently. Okay, I'm hearing that this is way bigger than person commits a crime, throw them away, and that's justice for the survivor. And then that's justice for the person who committed harm. So particularly in 1437, it was huge to see how we were able to humanize people's stories and people's needs. And that really helped with the 1437 law and legislation. Like, it's not one story, it's not one perspective. A person is not a quote unquote murderer, right? There's an individual who has committed violence. I mean, how many of us are the same people that we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago? How many of us same people we were at 15, 18, 20 years old? None of us are. We're very different people. And so that really helped in humanizing the people that these bills and pieces of voting legislation are going across people's desks.
That's great. What about First Watch? I was looking at your website and I saw some content about this show, First Watch. Would you tell us a little bit about that, Adnan?
Yeah, man. First Watch is another blessed opportunity where in San Quentin we were able to provide and I was able to fundraise and get equipment cleared through the administration for incarcerated people to be the filmmakers and the journalists and tell our own stories, kind of exactly what you two are doing now, but with film inside. So I remember when all this camera finally came in, I picked up the camera. I'm like, all right, how do I use this now? Right. And how do we like edit videos on a computer in a prison facility? Right. Sure. But we learned how, how to use cameras and become filmmakers, not incarcerated filmmakers, but filmmakers. Right. I don't want to qualify us as filmmakers just because we were incarcerated, like to dilute it. No, we could be on the same path, same level of greatness that everyone else is. And the idea was like, we are the journalist. We are the camera people. We are the people who are writing this piece, and we are the people who are being interviewed. So it's almost like I like to equate it to Steph Curry, right? Imagine if you want to learn about the Warriors and Steph Curry was the journalist and the documentarian. Wouldn't you want to hear straight from Steph Curry about what's happening with the Warriors versus someone outside trying to tell a story for them? Absolutely. So that was the way, but if you take a big step back, like a huge step back, and you look at the responsibility and the harmful responsibility of media towards incarceration and towards policing and towards criminalizing people, they have had a huge role. Media has had a huge role in the way our punitive system in society functions today. It goes all the way back to when they didn't have TVs and cameras or even like printing. It goes all the way back to the concept of the public display. And when people in the villages when they committed harm, they would have these shows essentially and execute people in front of the public in the center of the market. And that was a way to show you, look at this person who committed a harm. This is what they deserve. And then when the like the wanted posters and the printing press came and the concept of wanted posters, I mean, there's literally postcards, man, of pictures of people being lynched. And there's a bunch of white people laughing and smiling with a body lynched from a tree. And those are postcards. So think about the concept of pictures and postcards and wanted posters being utilized in print to criminalize someone. Therefore, you can treat someone a certain way in an acceptable way, right? And so you feel good about yourself in treating them. Then the radio came to be, the audio, and then video. And you look at the Willie Horton example. You look at the first Birth of a Nation. You look at all these movies. And then you look at the 90s and 2000s of CSI, New York, Miami, whatever, right? Law and Order. You look at all these shows. even when you make you create a criminal. So I remember when we were quick example, when we were writing a storyboarding and writing a piece we're about to film while we were incarcerated. So we were going to do like not a documentary, like an authentic piece, but more like there was acting involved. So it had to do with acting. So I remember like when we sat in that circle, like, okay, who is this individual that we are looking for? What does this character look like? Right. And we had to literally write the character. This is the character. This is how the character walks. This is how the character thinks. Now think about the writers of Law and Order, right? They have to literally sit in a circle or in a room and say, okay, who is this suspect? This suspect is black. This suspect is a Mexican gang member, right? This suspect sags their pants. They listen to hip hop music, or they have dreadlocks. They talk like this.
Where are they getting these ideas from? Right.
And why?
Right.
And why? But point is that it is intentional.
Sure.
It is very intentional, scripted, written out on purpose, and media consumes it. People consume it. So here you are sitting in your living room, right? Mm-hmm. And here you are sitting in your living room, and your only source of information about people who commit crimes is this dangerous person. So look at Law and Order, for example. It's a whodunit show. 1 hour, a crime has been committed. Who is this person? We finally found him. We lock him up. You know, we take him to trial. We lock him up. Show's over.
9 times out of 10, he's going to have a life sentence at the end of the show.
Nine times out of 10, the person going to have a life sentence, and law has been restored, and order has been restored. But what happens to the watcher, the audience? You're filled with the suspense. Oh my gosh, who is this person? This person could be in my neighborhood. This person is probably creeping in my bushes outside right now. So when it's time to vote, your only form of reference is Law and Order, or that show, that postcard with the lynching, right? That is the problem. So being man.
No, it's all good. But I want to ask you, what's the path forward in creating a new narrative? What's our path
what you're
forward?
doing, what you two are doing, impacted people, controlling the media.
Yeah, we gotta on the one hand, if you ask the media, I think they would say, oh, we're trying to be fair and balanced. We're just showing. But personal belief is they have their intentions, and we'll have ours, and ours is, as formerly incarcerated, get out here and paint a new narrative. Paint a new narrative. Here you have right here some 67 years to life at one time, and we're out here a part of organizations, serving the public, being of service, doing the work, being responsible citizens. We have been transformed, and so we want to paint a new narrative that says let's work together to restore. I like what you guys are doing, restore justice. I feel that your organization, our organization, have a kindred spirit, especially the work with so-called a violent offender. So those who committed an act of violence doesn't mean he's perpetually being violent for the rest of his life, and we gotta paint a new narrative and shift the way people think about prison, redefine the way redefine the way people think about formerly incarcerated, and that brings us to the like Prop 17 right now, the right for those on parole to vote, and other legislation. I would like to hear a little bit more about your extreme sentencing, if you guys have any bills coming out on that, because that is a way to redefine the way people think about sentencing. And I've long thought that mandatory minimums are ridiculous. Like in your case, the law says this, so we got to give it, even though the probation officer's report said he ought to be paroled. He ought to be given probation.
It takes the power out of the judge's hand, right? The very person who is trained and is steeped in the discipline of being unbiased and being a judge, an adjudicator of the law, is powerless.
Mm-hmm.
So
before I answer that question, man, I'm just letting you know I'm fired up. You guys got me fired up today. So I apologize for my long-windedness, man. I could talk about this all day and forever. So appreciate you giving me this space. I just want to be mindful of how much time do I have to answer that question? Are we wrapping up at 1, or is it like, do we have time?
We got about 5 more minutes.
So that just means we're gonna have to have you back on, Adnan.
Yep. Yeah. So we want to answer the question, and also hit on, if you could, Prop 17, Prop 20, and ways that people could be a part of what you guys are doing, maybe your website, ways to donate to your cause, what you guys are up to. So 5 minutes.
All right, real quick. Yeah, so real quick. As far as our goal is, we want to end extreme sentences and have alternatives to how people view what people need. It doesn't have to be incarceration. Accountability can be distributed different ways that keeps everyone safe. But our goal is to educate people on what violence and extreme sentences is as far as
Right.
bills and legislation. Right, literally a week or two before the pandemic, we had what's called a resolution on extreme sentencing. And our assembly member, Sydney Kumlager, she picked it up. It was going to go through the legislator. Pandemic happened. A bunch of legislators had to drop a lot of the stuff that they're doing and have urgent responses to the pandemic and employment and financial aid towards the employment. So we want to we're going to pick that back up. Hopefully, our goal is to pick that extreme sentencing resolution. It's not a bill. It's not a ballot measure. It's just a resolution that says to the legislature that something is wrong and we need to look at extreme sentencing again. In terms of Prop 17, voting for people who are on parole, people think that it's about rights and you don't have the right, or you do have the right to vote, or you shouldn't vote because you committed a crime. Well, I've been out of prison a year and a half. The same judge, like I mentioned, sentenced me to 25 to life, resentenced me to 3 years and said, I'm not putting you on parole or probation because that's excessive. So here I am. Seconds ago, I was this 25 to life, quote unquote, violent offender who doesn't deserve the right to vote. And moments later, 2-3 minutes later, now I'm safe for society and I have the right to vote because that one judge says that I shouldn't be on parole or probation. So voting, and when we look at voting for people who are formerly incarcerated, particularly those who are on parole, I mean, how do you reintegrate someone into democracy and not and tell them to participate in a society and not give them voting rights? That's how you participate in society. So it just logically doesn't make sense. It's not public safety to take voting rights away. Prop 20 is rolling back some of the reforms that California has had. It is a police bill. We know police lie all the time. It's rehabilitation and rehabilitative credits that helps people understand themselves and understand what's safe for public. And to undo that, it doesn't make sense. That's actually very dangerous for public. So be mindful, Prop 20, we don't want to undo that. We want to vote no on 20 because we want rehabilitation. And I think I'll end there, man.
All right. How can people find you at Restore Justice?
So, me personally, I'm mostly on Twitter now since March. Twitter has been a huge tool for me, which is AKHAN 1437, of course, the number. So my name again is at Akon 1437, but Restore Justice is at restorecal.org. One of the things that we have going on is we created this canteen page on Facebook, and you can find it on our website where people give directly to donate to people to their books for canteen during this time of the pandemic. So it's like if you know someone that's incarcerated, you could type in and submit their name, number, facility, and there'll be people who are donors that want to contribute and give directly to their books. And so I want to encourage everybody to go there. You don't have to donate to Restore Justice, our org. I'd rather give it to the people inside who need it right now the most.
Awesome.
And thank you for joining us, man. We definitely have to have you back.
Yes.
Appreciate your time. I'll also be checking you out on Facebook Live. Are you doing those every night?
So far, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
3 nights a week, 6 p.m.
We'll be there.
Hey, man, this has been another episode of the Prison Post. Thank you for coming, Adnan.
I appreciate you both for having me.
All right. Thanks, Adnan.
All right. Thank you for listening to The Prison Post, a production of the Crop Organization. We'll be sharing more stories from the world of prison reform and restorative justice, so please join us. You can listen to The Prison Post on all major podcasting platforms. Subscribe to our video cast on YouTube and like us on Facebook at The Prison Post and at Creating Restorative Opportunities and Programs.